Guillermo Mash here, the October 9th version of the KZFR 90.1 FM People-Powered Radio Peace and Social Justice Show. It's my distinct pleasure to have two friends of mine, longtime friend Jake Davis, and a cohort of his that's working on the 350.org local group. Claire, why don't you guys introduce yourself real quick and tell us why you're here in the studio?
Hey, yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
We're super happy to be here. I'm Claire Hutkins Seda, and I'm here with Jake Davis, and together we've been working on mobilizing local folks for a 350.org, which is a international group focused on climate change, on very big action, and making sure that we don't get above the 2 degrees Celsius limit for temperature rise worldwide.
Explain that 2 centigrade rise real fast.
Yeah, well, we are in a period of warming all around the world. 2015 is on track to be the hottest year in recorded history, and the previous hottest year was last year, 2014. The reason that we're warming is because of human activity and the release of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, which are warming the planet. And 2 degrees Celsius is the internationally agreed upon safe limit for temperature rise. Even at 2 degrees, we are already experiencing some pretty sizable changes in our environments around the world. But above 2 degrees becomes untenable for a lot of the basic needs of ecosystems, not just different animals, but on people as well, growing food and the rise of sea level and all of those things that would really make it a struggle for us to continue our lives as we know it.
Right now we're at 0.85 degrees above baseline. Baseline was set before the Industrial Revolution, basically. We were already able to measure carbon in the atmosphere at that point. So since baseline, through the Industrial Revolution, we're already at 0.85 degrees above baseline. And already we're seeing extreme storms and extreme weather events all over the world, flooding and drought and craziness. The 2 degrees is more than double what we've already got. We're in for a ride.
Yeah, it's a scary prospect. Even at 2 degrees, we're going to have some really serious challenges.
Maybe a quick intro for you, Jake.
My name is Jake Davis, and yeah, Claire and I got together on this. 350.org is a big international group that does a lot of these online petitions and big actions and things. And I've signed a lot of their petitions, I guess. And so they contacted me recently asking if I would want to start a local chapter of 350.org. And I said yes. And apparently they asked Claire too. The two of us got together, and here we are, getting it done.
Awesome. Maybe a little backstory. The very first program that I did for KZFR on the Peace and Social Justice Show was on 350.org, Bill McKibben, and we had Jake and Kevin Killian and Steve Trudy from Ecotopia in the studio. So
yeah.
Jake's my first returning guest.
Woohoo!
And I'm really proud to have him.
I'm honored, Bill.
So actually we kind of delved a little bit. You were talking about how we're already 0.85 above the baseline set at the Industrial Revolution. That's a good segue into the question of why is this so important right now?
The clock is ticking very rapidly. Each new study that comes out that is about climate change from climate scientists seems to say, oh my gosh, last time we released information, we were way undervaluing it, and things are happening quicker than we anticipated. And then next year, a new study comes out, and they say, oh man, it's going faster than we said last year. So the time is now. Like, we got to act on this thing, or it's going to be a pretty big deal.
Yeah, there's some really interesting statistics that the 350.org, the larger organization, is pushing out. One of them is that there's 5 times more amount of fossil fuels in the ground that we have compared to how much we can burn and stay below that 2 degrees Celsius. And of course, the fossil fuel industry is interested in burning it, and they spend $75 million an hour.
An hour.
To locate new sources of fossil fuels. So it's really essential that we come together and say that we need to keep them in the ground. It is a matter of us doing our personal pieces as well, but in addition to that, it's key right now that we come together to let people see how important it is that we tell the fossil fuels companies that they can no longer do business as usual because it's affecting everything.
So I know the fossil fuels is one of the first industries that comes to mind when people think about global warming and CO2 levels. But what about other industries such as the meat industry and agriculture? Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
You know, I haven't yet seen Cowspiracy, but it's all the rage right now. I've been hearing about it from so many people. Apparently the meat industry is a big deal. Animal agriculture is the largest contributing factor to climate change. From the methane they produce, to the water they use, to all the chemicals that run off, to the antibiotics, to just the whole the whole thing is pretty bad. So I'm not super well versed in that. I haven't seen the movie yet, but yeah, agriculture is a big one. Energy is a big one. Transportation is a big one.
Yeah. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look on it, climate change is all-encompassing. So I'm talking about our personal food choices, how we choose to get ourselves from point A to point B, whether we have solar panels on our roof. All of those things are essential steps to making a stand in climate change. But 350.org is very, very focused on the fossil fuel addiction, especially right now coming up to the Paris talks. The UN climate change talks in Paris are going to be opening at the end of November and run for a couple weeks into December. And people are terrified that it's going to be another failed meeting.
They've met lots of times before and never been able to come to sort of an international agreement.
Yeah, so, the 350.org's push is that we need to turn off our global fossil fuel addiction and turn on the clean solutions, that it's possible. It is possible now, but it requires a lot of building power, not just in Paris, but afterwards, and that power needs to come from people getting together and making a stand and continuing past, not just focusing on Paris, although that's important too, but keeping the momentum going.
So maybe this is a good time to stop on this. One of the first questions I had is, what is 350.org? I mean, What is even that number 350?
Yeah, well, 350 is the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the air. So long ago, when Bill McKibben, the founder of 350.org, got together and they looked at the data and they decided, we need to take an international stand against climate change. And they really wanted it to be international. And so one of the barriers is language when you're working internationally. So they chose 350, the parts per million of carbon dioxide in the air, to show we don't really want to go above that. We want to stay there. And they knew that the number, there's Cyrillic and other, I don't know, does Cyrillic use numerals? I don't know. Anyway, numbers were easier than words, right? So they went with 350. Unfortunately, we're far past 350.
Yeah, we're above 400 parts per million right now.
Yes. We are.
How does that relate to the 2 centigrades? Is there a direct correlation, or?
There is. It's interesting. When they first started measuring carbon in the atmosphere and global temperatures, they didn't see a real strong correlation at first. And it took about 40 to 50 years before they noticed that the added CO2 that we've put into the atmosphere started showing itself in temperature increases. And so the Industrial Revolution is a great example, because at the beginning there was not a lot of carbon getting spit in the atmosphere. But then suddenly we started a lot all at once. And it took 40 to 50 years before all that new carbon started to show up as temperature change. And so now we're at 400 parts per million in the air. And we have 40 years to deal with that new temperature increase.
I think a really important thing about 350.org that is really interesting is they've proven that climate change advocacy is not a white middle-class kid thing. And I don't know how much you've ran into this, Jake, but I definitely know when I started focusing on these issues when I was in college, 15 years ago or so, it was largely assumed that if you struggle to put food on your plate, or if you're trying to get out of poverty, or if you're in an abusive family, that climate change is just not on your agenda. You have to work on these other things. And 350.org is, because of their international focus, has largely proven that's just not the case. People that are struggling with poverty are the ones that are most affected by climate change. And those are the people that are rising up and saying how critical it is for us as a world to come together and focus on this, because they are the ones being affected. So it's really interesting. 350.org has had climate rallies in every country of the world except North Korea at this point. So they really have a big reach. And it's really interesting. I read more and more online news that talks of, asking people in Nigeria and in South America. I listened to one recently about South America, asking people what are their biggest concerns for the world, and they often say climate change first.
Not Americans, though. Americans put it pretty low on the list.
Yeah, we put it pretty low.
Which is interesting, because this is a land of plenty. We've got so much, and it's all taken care of, and so we don't need to worry about this sort of scary monster out on the horizon. We're going to focus on what we have today.
Or people, hope for a technological fix.
I think the United States, I'm just pulling the number out of the air. I mean, we consume like a third of all the petroleum in the world, and we're like, far less than that as a percentage of population.
We're definitely the one of the largest contributors to climate change in the world. And unfortunately, the people who are not contributing are the ones that are getting hit first. All those people that are still tied into the land. We're pretty disconnected from the earth here in the West. We have farmers that grow our stuff. We go to the grocery store and buy it. It's all... We don't really deal a lot, but those that are still dependent upon the land, which really we all are, they're getting hit first.
Yeah, more directly dependent on the land.
Yeah, because they're not getting rain. I saw this wonderful film. Monica Bell put it on over at the church down here on First.
I love her.
But it was shout out Monica Bell. But it was called Edible City, and it actually talked about Cuba, which they had described as one of the, if not the largest, integrated local farms in the world. And the reason was petroleum embargo.
Right.
They couldn't ship food around, so they had to grow it locally.
And they also weren't able to get nitrogen fertilizers and pesticides once the fall of communism, right?
Yep, that was part of it. Thank you. I'd forgotten that little piece of it. Yeah, so they really were in a quote-unquote pickle. But if you look at Africa or Nigeria, they're even in a bigger pickle because they have the same dynamics as Cuba, only they don't have the rainfall and they don't have that level of affluence. So they're literally living in like below extreme poverty.
Right, yeah.
I think the number is 2 billion people live in extreme poverty, less than $2 a day.
Wow.
So let's shift gears a little bit. So we talked a little about 350 was all related to the parts per million and how 350.org is starting to look at having local groups, plug into what they're doing. Maybe you could explain how your local group's going to plug into the national worldwide effort.
Sure. Well, first off, we are just starting to form, so we're not officially an affiliate yet. There actually is a process that we have to go through. Did you know that, Jake?
I didn't. I thought we were good. Oh, crap.
Damn processes.
I'm going to be on a call, and I just RSVP'd for it, and I will invite you to,
all right, thanks.
to kind of learn the ropes. They do want to, make sure that everyone's very well integrated into what they're up to. And they also, they're very good about providing templates for doing actions and, giving a lot of tools and resources to be as effective as possible locally. So, so we're looking forward to doing that. Right now, we're just a group inspired by 350.org, and we'll shortly be affiliated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a big part of their push is to get people on board with these larger actions. Like last year, 350 was responsible for the giant climate march in New York City. It drew like 500,000 people or something in the streets of New York. And that was mostly 350.org.
Yeah, that one was super awesome. It's it ended up, we were talking about it, we were joking around at our last meeting here locally, that it ended up not being a people's climate march, but a people's climate standstill, because people just couldn't get through.
There were so many people, the streets were just clogged. Yeah, they couldn't move. Yeah.
Hey, they're ground zero, so to speak. They're looking at New York being underwater.
A lot of it,
that's an island.
Most of Manhattan.
And really, that is the other strength of 350.org. In addition to being international, they've really made it a key. It's been very key for them to connect with other groups in the community and in the nation that might not feel like a direct climate change fit, but actually, because climate change is so all-encompassing, ends up being, a good fit. Things like children well-being, healthcare, labor. These are all groups that at first glance don't appear to have a direct connection to climate change, but when you look at the breadth of changes to the earth and what that means for our local economies, what that means for our health, what that means for our communities, all of these things are threatened.
Yeah, and I mean, if you just look physically, New York, the financial capital of the United States, and kind of go, it's going to be under like 4 or 5 feet of water. It's like
all that money's not going to help you then, is it?
But that's where this whole idea that there'll be a technological advance, we'll build walls around Manhattan, and everyone's like, you've got it figured out. So there's this whole way of kicking the can down the road, but really, like you said, leave the petroleum in the ground and start moving on more greener resources to actually power our economies. Did you guys come up with a name?
Chico 350.
Yeah.
Chico
350.org/Chico.
I could ask how you came up with that name, but that would be kind of like...
keep it simple.
Yeah. How do you access to your group? You guys got a presence yet? Facebook or
any
type of... you do?
We've been working on a presence, I did the Facebook page.
And I did an email address.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
So the Facebook page is chico350.org, right?
350.org Chico.
Okay, well then the email is the other way around.
Oh, we should.
Well, the email is chico350.org@gmail.com.
Okay.
But please join us on Facebook too to hear about our up and coming actions.
And I'm sure if you just search Facebook for 350.org and then the word Chico,
It'll be
I'm
there.
pretty sure you'll find us.
Boom.
Yeah.
So I guess you would contact the group through either of those two ways
Yeah.
at this point, email or go through the Facebook page.
Yep. And we are, right now, since we are just forming, we are looking for a good handful of folks that would be kind of a core group of organizers that can help us, particularly for our upcoming events. We are working on the People's Climate March, which is the nationwide action preceding the Paris talks. And that will probably be November 29th. And then afterwards, because we recognize that the Paris talks are not the end of our problems, we're going to continue the momentum and have another gathering, probably December 12th. And then 350.org is dangling this very fun thing that in April 2016, will be a massive action. But we don't get to hear the details till later.
It's a teaser.
It is. Keep it on your reader.
Yeah.
Awesome. How'd your first meeting go? You guys have met once, twice?
Yeah, we met once so far, and I think it went well. We had only 6 people maybe, but it was kind of short notice.
Right.
But yeah, we had 6 of us, I think, that turned out, and we tossed some real cool ideas around, and basically it's sort of a brainstorming session, like, what are we going to do as a group, and how are we going to get our community involved? And yeah, this is a great resource. Thanks, Bill, for having us on.
worries.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Chico that I've noticed is that our different groups are a little bit insular. That, if you're part of the gardening group, then you go to the gardening stuff and you do the permaculture stuff and those type of things. But if you're involved in perhaps
Peace and justice,
or even activism for people who don't have roofs, you might not hear that much about what's going on in the gardening world. And all the pieces overlap in terms of, making our communities more livable and even addressing larger issues like climate change, but we're not talking that much. So this is a really unique platform to get us to talk a little bit more. And
it really affects all of us. I mean, whether you're a gardener or a peace person or what, it's coming for all of us. So.
Yeah, if you're into the trees locally, or if you're a bike advocate, or if you're doing frack-free Butte County, or if you're working on water issues, all of these things are related to climate change.
Basically, if you breathe air or eat food, this is for you. Get on board.
That's been the funnest thing about doing these shows, the Without a Roof Economic Justice and this Peace and Social Justice. And I sub once on Ecotopia, so I'm learning about these parallel issues. And you're 100% correct. There's always an overlap to all of those ones that you physically had mentioned. So I'm going to ask a question of maybe Claire, starting with you, if you could give us a couple of minutes of description of why we should get involved with this issue, 350.org and the 2 centigrades. Give us a 2-minute plea.
Sure. So the way we interact with nature, with our environment, is fundamentally what makes us human. So when we do those personal actions, when we pledge to ride our bike, or we stop eating meat, or we pledge to attend these rallies, like this one that's coming up on November 29th for locally here, the 350.org one, we're reconfirming our connection to the earth and our dedication to it. And these personal actions are essential to making a difference. And when it comes to when we come together, then it's not just essential, it's powerful. It really can make a difference. And so a great example of this is the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yeah.
And before 350.org activists took it on, it was considered a done deal. And now it's not so done a deal. In fact, it's been on hold for quite a long time, and every day that it's not in operation is that much fuel that's kept in the ground and not burned and put into our atmosphere. The carbon dioxide is not put into our atmosphere.
Claire, it's been such a pleasure having you in the studio, and I look forward to you hearing as your project proceeds.
Thank you so much for having us in.
Thanks again, Jake Davis.
Thank you.
Until the next time.
Bye-bye.